Hello friends, you've stumbled across a short clip from the Daily Switch 2 podcast, which, believe it or not, is a podcast that is about the Switch 2 with new episodes released daily. What will they think of next? For those living under a rock, Tetris was the first major success in the genre, spawning a million copycats and clones. First invented in Russia by Alexei Pajitnov, the complicated rules around ownership of copyright in communist Russia at the time have caused many twists and turns in the rights to make a video game, from the original idea of arranging tetrominos, or shapes made out of 4 blocks, into lines in satisfying ways. Many people in the 80s and early 90s, including myself as a kid, assumed the game to be a Nintendo property, being a key NES title and a major part of the famed Nintendo World Championships, no less, and even more famously being the pack-in game with the original DMG Game Boy in 1989, and a major reason why the portable system took off so enormously so quickly, bringing many adult gamers to buy the system and play it on their commute to work. Tetris kind of became the puzzle that replaced the New York Times crossword. It was the original Wordle, so to speak, and Nintendo packaging it in with the Game Boy instead of the more obvious choice of Super Mario Land was a masterstroke. People who weren't typically gamers but wanting to get in on the craze would buy the system, and existing gamers would obviously be willing to spend the extra for the latest Mario and Zelda titles. It's genius. But even on Nintendo systems at the time, there was licensing controversy. Atari was pretty sure that they owned the rights to make a console version of Tetris because they had negotiated computer rights. And so they produced their own Tetris for the NES through their Tengen imprint, which Nintendo promptly banned from sale only after copies had already been manufactured and hit the shelves. To this day, it remains one of the most valuable NES games if you can find a copy, especially in a nice condition box, or let alone sealed. And imagine my confusion when, as a young lad in 1992 visiting Spain for the Olympics, I saw a Tetris arcade cabinet in an isolated wooden tavern deep in the snowy Sierra Nevada mountains, and it had a bloomin' great big Sega logo, not only on the cabinet, but throughout the game itself. What on earth was going on? Puyo Puyo, on the other hand, is something that I always associated with Sega. Though back in the day we called it Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, as was the style at the time. It wasn't actually a Sega creation. Compile made the original Puyo Puyo game in the arcades, and it was a huge hit in Japan, but when bringing it to the West, Sega thought they needed a hook to make people more interested. On first glance, it might appear similar to their own Tetris-inspired puzzle game Columns, because they both keep the same basic falling blocks, but replace the lining up of different shapes with lining up of uniform shapes, but instead matching colours. Something that might sound simple at first, but allows for skilled players with good foresight and some luck from the random block choice gods to set up enormous and satisfying chain reactions, gaining skill multiplier points. Columns had been a success, but nowhere near the level of Tetris, but on the Sega Game Gear at least, it did a really good job of showing that Sega could at least sometimes do what Nintendo don't, because of the monochrome pea soup screen of the DMG never being able to play columns. You needed colour for that. But I think most people would agree that Puyo Puyo did the colour matching take on a Tetris-style game far more effectively than Sega's first attempt. Intuitively, addictively, Sega knew this and saw dollar signs. But in the West at least, Sega of America wanted to maximize sales and decided to enlist the help of their mascot, and the only true industry-wide competition to Mario, Sonic the Hedgehog. At the time, Sega were having a little trouble with making the latest Sonic game. The Sonic team had been split into two after one half went to work on Sonic CD and the other to Sonic 2, and the enormously ambitious Sonic 3 was taking longer than planned to develop, eventually even needing to be split into 2 separate cartridge releases, as I'm sure most of you know. And there was the unthinkable prospect of a holiday season for Sega with no new Sonic game on the shelves. So instead, Sega went all out, quickly pulling in second-party and third-party developers and putting out spin-offs left, right, and center. The excellent Sonic Chaos for Game Gear and the superior version for the Master System, which, despite floundering in America and Japan, was doing huge numbers in Europe, Australia, and South America, comfortably outselling the NES. The Master System version of Sonic Chaos is actually the first console game that I saved up and bought with my own money rather than having it as a present. Fun fact. For Genesis and Mega Drive, they took the logical step of taking some of the pinball elements of levels in platform games and building an entirely pinball-based game in Sonic Spinball. And finally, they persuaded Compile to let them hastily reskin Puyo Puyo, removing the anime aesthetic, which was not really yet properly established in America. Arguably, anime was still pretty niche until Pokemon at the end of the 90s, though many die-hard gamers like me that read gaming magazines that covered imports knew all about Akira, Ghost in the Shell, Fist of the North Star, Robotech, Speed Racer, Dragon Ball, Sailor Moon, the Ghibli movies and the like. We were definitely part of a small club, though. It wasn't as popular an art form as it is now, nowhere near, and save for European Japanese co-productions like Dogtanyan, One for Roll, One for One, Willy Fogg with 80 Days Around the World, Ulysses 31, and The Mysterious Cities of Gold. And on the subject of popular early 90s cartoons, it was actually the Dick, or Deek, D-I-C, Dick, animated series. I'm doing the voice of the little kid at the end with the logo. Dick. Always used to make me laugh. Dick. Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. That inspired the Robotnik reskin of Puyo Puyo. It wasn't the Sonic games themselves. The design for Robotnik himself, the early name for Eggman, for those of you not in the know, although I guess the movies mean that even the youngest of fans know that nowadays, and his Badnik henchmen Scratch and Grounder are ripped right from the Dick series. Whilst it's less well-loved in the community than SatAM or Saturday AM Freedom Fighter series, at the time I loved it and recorded every episode on VHS and watched them over and over until the tapes wore thin. That series is the one nowadays probably best known for the meme-worthy Sonic Says PSA bits awkwardly inserted into the end of each episode, which, yes, once included an anti-SA PSA for kids, which is funny because of the context, but their heart was clearly in the right place. But Puyo Puyo didn't belong to Sega, they just licensed it from Compile. And Nintendo got into the sneaky reskin franchise insertion game too. If you were a Super Nintendo player, as was I as well, I was lucky enough to have both a Sega and a Nintendo, you might know this game as Kirby's Avalanche. But Mean Bean Machine was the big seller, so much that Sega eventually bought Compile and continued producing Puyo Puyo games to this day. And while nowadays they've reverted back to the real name and anime aesthetics, the Mean Bean lore is now fully canon in Sonic's universe, with Robotnik using it as an innovative, minor spoilers for an old game alert, boss in the excellent Sonic Mania, and centering Dr. Robotnik's character in the movies around a coffee shop called what else but the Mean Bean. That really made me smile when I saw it the first time. Well, that was funny / sad / informative / stupid, wasn't it? Feel free to mentally redact to make that make sense with the clip that you just heard. I don't know what it was. I'm just recording a bumper. But if you enjoyed the clip, please give it a like. If you'd like to hear more, click subscribe, and you can find all the ways to listen to and support the full daily podcast at linktree/dailyswitch2. That's linktr.ee/dailyswitch2. Let's go! Did I sound like I mean that? I do. I really do.